your objection was, how comes I am not perceiving your thoughts? And my answer was, how do you know you're not perceiving them? And forgetting, if you will, that in a nutshell, my answer.
Oh, right, okay.
And that it is not recorded. Because even if you make the claim that it is the same consciousness, awareness, that was perceiving you having your breakfast and that is hearing my words right now, even that, you don't have any evidence that it is the same reality. But if you go back to what we said in the beginning of this conversation, that if there is interaction between two realities, they have to be considered as being the same reality. So, in other words, if there is interaction between your consciousness and my consciousness, they have to be considered as sharing the same reality. And obviously, in this moment, there is interaction between your consciousness and my consciousness. Right?
Mm.
In other words, you are not talking to something
I'm getting feedback that I can understand.
The very fact that we are interacting in a conversation implies interaction between whatever is perceiving your thoughts and whatever is perceiving my thoughts, right?
Hmm.
Now, which means that, according to what we talked about earlier, that two interacting realities, your consciousness, my consciousness, if we use this word temporarily, because they are interacting, they are to be considered to be sub-realities of an ultimate reality which encompasses both.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Now, if you ask then yourself this very simple question, what is experientially the ultimate reality which is hearing these thoughts? In other words, what is the reality of consciousness? As consciousness being the reality which is perceiving the thoughts. You see, you will reach the conclusion that the reality of consciousness has to be the real consciousness. It has to be that which really is perceiving and not something which is allegedly or seemingly perceiving, but it is that which is really perceiving, right? Right? Therefore, the reality of consciousness has to be that which is really perceiving these words in this moment. But isn't it precisely you? Or is it something else than you perceiving in this moment that is the reality that perceives? No. You see, the reality of consciousness is consciousness itself, experientially. You see, it's like and then you can, through iteration, say the reality of the reality of the reality of consciousness is consciousness. In mathematics, we call that property idempotence. It's idempotent element. The reality of 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 consciousness is consciousness. The buck stops right here. It stops with that reality which is hearing these words right now. And that's an extraordinary possibility that opens up when we understand this, that this seemingly limited, ordinary consciousness is in fact something else. That it is in fact the way the reality of the universe perceives itself, knows itself in all human beings. Because when you think about it, it's normal. We share the same reality as the universe. You know, the fermions, the bosons this human body is made of are not different from the fermions and the bosons that are all over the place. And they interact with each other. So it's obvious that this body is not an isolated item, it's not a unique thing. You see, it's just the way the universe locally dances. So that the reality of this human body and the reality of the universe is the same. They share the same reality, whatever this reality is. But what is extraordinary is to be open to the possibility that this very transparent, invisible consciousness is in fact not limited by the body, doesn't depend on the body. The mind, yes, the cognitive abilities through this human body, through the sense organs, through the nervous system, through the hardware and software of this biocomputer. Of course, when the biocomputer goes down the drain, all of that disappears, of course. But the perceiving reality, which knows itself as awareness, doesn't. Because in fact, it is also the reality of everything. It is the cosmic reality. So the fundamental equation, if you will, is awareness equals reality, or awareness equals substance equals being equals reality. There is only one reality. Let me give you more food for thought. Look, let's assume consciousness is not real.
Why do we assume that? Because it's obviously real. Like I don't even understand that assumption.
For instance, if we decide that consciousness is separate, it implies it's not real.
Belonging to Francis, belonging to Dom, belonging to a deer, and so on and so on and so on.
If we assume it is individual, separate, it means it's not real. Right? Because as we saw, two interacting realities, like my consciousness and yours, have to be part of a bigger reality that encompasses both because they are interacting, right? So if we assume that consciousness is separate, it means it implies it's not real. Right? Now, if it is not real, how can a non-real consciousness have access to anything real? How? So nothing that can be perceived by this individual consciousness, nothing can be real. You see, something which is not real cannot perceive that which is real. It's another way to look at this argument, a different approach that I am giving you. If consciousness is limited, individual, separate yours from mine, it implies it's not real, right? Because if your consciousness and my consciousness are real, it means they are one single reality. If they are separate, they are not real. But if something is not real, how can it have access or perceive the real? How can the less perceive the more? how can an illusion perceive reality? For instance, you have a dream. In this dream, you have a conversation with some guy, right? In the dream, you believe that this guy is perceiving your words. Because in the dream, you believe that this guy is real, is for real. So you believe that this real person is really perceiving your words.
Mm-hmm.
Now you wake up. Now you know at that moment that this person you encounter in your dream was an illusion. Do you still believe it was perceiving your words?
No, of course not.
Right. Of course not, because an illusion cannot really perceive, right? Something which is not real cannot really perceive. So, going back to the argument I was making, if your consciousness, my consciousness are separate, according to our previous conversation, they are not real. How could they then perceive anything real? Then anything goes, you know? There is nothing real from that moment on. Which, of course, we cannot accept that because we say, yes, there is something real, damn it, yes, there is something real. There is something rather than nothing. I know that for certain. There is something rather than nothing. We know that for certain. So if you take backwards this line of reasoning, it follows. If I am certain of anything, it implies that consciousness is real. I, the one who is certain, I am real. And if I am real, it implies I am this one reality. For instance, if I am certain that there is something rather than nothing, whatever this something is, if I am absolutely certain, it implies that whatever is certain is real.
And you say this because there's a certain feeling associated with certainty.
No, not a feeling. No.
Okay, perhaps that's the wrong word.
Oh, no, it's not a feeling. You ask yourself the question, is there something rather than nothing? Yes or no?
Yes.
It's not a feeling. It's a self-evidence.
Self-evidence, yes.
How long does it take to know that there is something rather than nothing? If you ask yourself
it's
the question.
Direct. It's no time.
No time. It's instantaneous. Right? And if you ask, it's the same question. If you ask the question, is there consciousness or is there awareness in this moment?
Of course.
It's the same, meaning that
same.
it implies that the source of these two answers, the experience is the same. You go to the same experience to get the answer to these two questions, because in fact, they are like two sides of the same coin. Because look, if there is consciousness, if I am conscious, it's already something. It's not nothing. It's not an absolute nothingness. Even if nothing is perceived, I am there as this perceiving reality, and that's sufficient for there to be something rather than nothing, right?
Yes.
So the presence of perceptions is not necessary to convince myself that there is something rather than nothing. And if there is something rather than nothing experientially, because if there is something rather than nothing non-experientially, it doesn't mean anything either. But
Does it mean, sorry?
If there is something rather than nothing non-experientially, it's a pure conjecture. It's a pure theory.
Yes.
It
needs to be direct.
It's like the unicorns. It's like, for instance, in modern physics, right? There are theories that involve other universes, right? Different types of multiverse theories. But the problem with these theories is that there is no way to experientially verify or falsify these theories. So then they are beyond the scope of physics because we have no way. They will remain forever theories. You see, in science, a theory that cannot be verified or falsified is completely useless, at least in my view. It can be as a step towards a better theory, it can be useful in research, right? But ultimately, if it doesn't lead to a verifiable, falsifiable theory, it remains forever a theory which has never landed on the ground of reality. So it's the same here. It's the same here. So the fundamental equation, if you will, of non-duality is there is only one reality, and it is this reality which perceives these words in this moment.
What does that make everything that we perceive, including other body minds, including even the concept of other?
The corollaries of that are mind-blowing. For instance, it implies that your reality and my reality are the same. It implies in my communication that I don't consider you as separate from me. It is kind of a game of hide and seek we are playing with our own self, you know.
Yes.
So and then that alone gives our social interactions a very different and harmonious quality, which is love, which is intelligence, you know, which enables us to break the barriers and to gives us the ability to see the situation from the vantage point of the so-called other person, to be open to this possibility. And also, frankly, it's another word for love, you know, that love is that which takes place when there is this intuition and an implicit acknowledgement that there are no others, that there is only one reality, one universal reality, which is moving like an ocean, if you will, and this body-mind and this body-mind are waves in this ocean. Their lifespan is limited, like a wave, and but they are part of the universal motion, and it is the same awareness which contemplates this universal motion from two vantage points, if you will, which are temporary, which are not going to last forever, but which are temporary. And there is an infinity of games of waves in this universe. So practically speaking, for us, it changes. It changes our, if I am in a business relationship with you, if I consider myself to be separate from you, I'm going to try to squeeze you as much as I can to maximize my profit. If I come from this different place, I would not try to do that because I will be aware that a good deal between us is a deal in which both of us, from which both of us benefit. You see, it's a deal. So then there is harmony in the deal making, and the result, for instance, if I am in business, the result will be that, yes, I knew that you had to buy this good for me, and that I could have asked for you to pay 100% more. I didn't do that. I gave you a just price because I wanted fairness. And what is going to happen is at some point you are going to recognize it, and you're going to trust me and do further business with me, which would be ultimately in our common interest. Although in the short term, it seems that if I had squeezed you, I would have maximized my profit. But in the long term, it was not a good move. The intelligent move was also the loving move, you see. So you can transpose this corollary to everything, but it doesn't apply. That's one corollary that is about social interactions and love. But something else is, for instance, how do events in the world affect us? You know, if I am a separate entity from the rest of the universe, I see the universe that surrounds me as hostile, you see. I am afraid that I'm in a position of defense and aggression. Whereas, in fact, if I am open to the possibility that the universe is not my enemy, then there is a very different way to interact with the universe. It's more like a dance in harmony. I'm not trying to swim against the flow. You see, I allow for the flow to take me. And sometimes, yes, I can move left and right of an obstacle on the flow, but always moving with the flow. That's the Tao, you know, the Taoist, you know. That's the idea, this flexibility, this going with where life takes us. Another, by the way, talking about ethics, you know that philosophy has a very hard time defining ethics, because they always try to define ethics from rules. But where do the rules come from? It is usually religious. You know, the table, the commandments, or the Quran, or whatever. It's
or the
always,
Eight Noble Path, or whatever. Yeah.
Right. But books of rules, although it is useful to keep some level of harmony in society, is unsatisfactory because it never applies perfectly to any situation, like thou shalt not kill. Well, there are circumstances where the good thing to do is to kill. You know, the police chief, you know, there is a hostage taker in the bank, right? He has already killed 2 people. He's going to kill every 10 minutes 1 more person. And then the SWAT team has a clear shot at the guy. What is the police chief going to tell he's going to just kill the hostage taker? That's the right thing to do in this situation.
In this situation, right? Yes.
Right. So, using this very violent example, I show that there are no absolute rules that can be in a book that we would feel are ethical, right? So, yes. How do we find a definition of ethics? You don't find that in philosophy. There are always games, and you can see that the games being played, at the end of the day, there are some pre-defined defined values that will come to the surface. A little bit like a lawyer knows already what he wants to prove, right? And then through everything, the kitchen sink, you know, to prove. But it is not a true search of the truth. The truth has been predefined, and then we find justification for it, right? And you will see that in most philosophical attempts at defining ethics, the rules that seem to come as a natural conclusion or logical conclusion at the end were in fact already put in, albeit in a more subtle way, in the very beginning. So basically, it's postulates. Here is a difference, and that's the beauty of it. Is that what is in the book of Non Duality? What is the right action, the ethical action? It cannot be predefined, of course, in a book of rules. It has to be determined in the context. But what is the rule that enables us to determine it in the context? It's the truth. The truth that there is only one reality. If there is only one reality, it means that the correct line of action, the correct decision, is one that assumes that the consciousness, for instance, in all parties involved is the same. And as a result of an investigation of what is the line of action which is in line with the truth, in line with the non-duality, there is only one consciousness, only one reality. That would be the ethical action. In a different situation, different decision. It is a rule which is not given a priori. It just either it is true that there is one reality or not. If it is true that there is only one reality, and if we act in accordance with it in our decision-making process, there will be an outcome of this different type of decision we have made. And this outcome will be some kind of experiential proof of the truth of the hypothesis from which our decision was made. So you have to look, if you make the right decision, which is the impersonal decision, the one which is in line with non-duality, that the consequences in the world and within ourselves are going to be increased harmony. And sometimes in serendipitous way, in almost magical ways, the world will kind of cooperate, and within more harmony, a sense of peace, a sense of love, a sense of happiness. So that's how we derive some kind of experiential verification of falsification of the non-dual hypothesis, if you will.
So essentially, we're saying that it's foolish even to write down any ethics, any morality, because the right action only reveals itself in the moment.
Provided, yes, but provided there is enough maturity to understand this. I'm not saying that, okay, we have the laws, right? And then we have social norms. The laws are just there to prevent people to murder, to steal, to rape, right? The laws don't force, at least not yet, people to be polite, for instance, right? So there are other societal conventions that have a purpose, right? Which is right to, and I'm not saying that these things are useless, not at all. No, no, no. Because they are there to kind of maintain a kind of harmony in society in spite of the fact that people believe to be separate. But when this belief in separation goes away, the rules are no longer necessary, because then there is goodwill to do the impersonal thing. And then the application of this becomes more subtle, because the rules cannot take into account all possible configurations, all possible contexts and situations we encounter. So then every situation, especially if the situation is consequential, has to be pondered with in light of this non-dual understanding. Of course, there are many situations in daily life where we don't have to. Is it ethical to have my breakfast? Of course, who cares? You see what I mean?
Well, you could, like in the case of breakfast, you could consider eating meat. That's
Yeah,
also
yeah,
an
yeah.
ethical
Yeah,
thing to consider.
Yes. But the simple question, should I have breakfast or not?
Yes, in that context, yes. And this is perhaps another topic, but how does, like, the way I see it, the way society is structured, we have to earn a livelihood doing something. And it also seems to me that we all have certain interests, certain tendencies. And if we really try to chip away at them, are they really true? Are they false? Are they conditioned desires? And I feel like the more we chip away at what our true desires are, there's like a certain tendency within every single one of us. So I guess my question is, how do we go about into the world? Because we still have to be part of the world. We still have to go into society, earn a livelihood, and so on, to pay for food and clothing and shelter. How does this understanding affect that decision? If this makes sense as a question. I guess my real question is, what role does the individual, you could say, okay, yes, individual body mind have in terms of the one reality?
Well, the individual body mind is a given. We are, as human body minds, we are all different, right?
Yes.
And as consciousness, we are the benevolent manager of the body mind. We are not the body mind. We are just a benevolent manager of the body mind. So the body mind is a vehicle. Just as we take care of our car, we take it to have an oil change, or to change the tires, or to verify the brakes, whatever. We do the same with the body and the mind also. We as a benevolent manager, we avoid whatever is detrimental to the body or to the mind, for instance. If you're in love with truth, with beauty, with love, that is going to change the kind of book you read, the kind of music you listen to, the kind of people you hang out with, the kind of conversations you have, etc. It's going to change how you decorate your house. It's going to change the kind of job you have, how you behave in this job, and all of that is important. It is going to affect all compartments of your life. And something else is going to happen also, is that often people have a very compartmentalized life. They have their job, They have the children, they have the partner, they have the friends, they have the society as a whole. And all of that is in little boxes, kind of. And you'll see that when you come from this global perspective, the walls between the little boxes disappear and everything becomes one and more fluid.
And
going back there, but there is something else to say about that.
Yes, I would love to hear.
Because regarding, because as you said, the kind of professional activity we have is important. And we should follow our heart. We should endeavor to have a job, an activity that we love, that makes us happy, that we go to the office or we go to our business and we look forward to it in the morning. It's that very simple. If you don't look forward to your day of work, you have to do your best to change your line of work if you can. You see, because otherwise it will give you ulcers, cancer, whatever. You see what
yes, of course, yes.
You have to follow. That's what I mean by being a benevolent manager of your body mind, and because you are not going to be a good thing, a good person for society if you are miserable. You need to be happy to make people happy around you. It's very important to understand. You cannot make people happy at the detriment of your own happiness. Think about that. Think, you go to a therapist, you are miserable, you are suicidal. You go to this therapist and you tell him, I bought a gun this morning. I want to kill myself. The therapist says, welcome to the club. I did the same yesterday. I mean, what kind of therapist is this guy? If he's miserable, yes, how can he change the course? You see, no matter how many degrees and PhDs in psychology from Harvard he has, he's a poor suicidal fellow, right? He's miserable. So it's a caricature, of course, but what I'm trying to illustrate is that you're going to be able to make people happy around you to the extent that you're happy, you see, or at peace. Because then you have first to fill up this container with happiness up until it can overflow and be shared. But if you have nothing in terms of happiness to share, what can you do? You see, very important. So we all have to seek to pursue happiness, all of us. And it is not through coercion, through discipline, through effort, which is not agreed upon at the deep level, that we can achieve this happiness and this peace. So because of the professional activities, the way we make our living, it takes such a big share of our life, which is limited in time. We have to endeavor to find, whenever possible, a vocation, to find a job we like. And knowing that we may change direction 5 years later, but at least the fact that we have made this determination will already make us feel free, that we are not condemned to forced labor forever. You see, that we are a free agent, and that life is going to bring us whatever we need in due time. And in the meantime, whatever obstacle we may find or hardship, because I don't have the perfect job, right? I have in mind to find the perfect, but right now it's a little boring, right? Take it as a yoga exercise. Something you have to master. You are not here forever. life is offering you this thing to take you to the next level, spiritually. And then when you have finished that, the Red Sea will open, something else will, and because ultimately your vocation, our vocation is happiness, that's a real vocation. So try to follow your heart and your heart's desire. And without stiffness, because, you're a 5-year-old kid and you are asked, okay, what would you like to do later? I said, I'd like to be a soldier. And then he's 7 years old. What would you like to do later? I'd like to be a fireman. And then he's 10. What would you like to do? I'd like to be a pilot. You see? So, but it's beautiful because there is this enthusiasm, you see, so you have to follow your enthusiasm to really want to be all of these, but take turns because you allow yourself the flexibility to shift in your vocation. You see? So the vocation is a moving target, if you will. But that enables you to live a life without regrets. You see what I mean? If at every moment, at every fork on the road, I try to do the right thing, both for me and for everybody around, which is the impersonal path, I cannot have any regrets.
And I understand what you're saying. How do I put this? We obviously need to speak about this, to talk about these things, but if we're speaking in terms of doing something, building something, creating something, to change, because there is a lot of confusion about this in general. It seems to me that this begins with education in school. Because would you feel like there's a lot of capacity in children, in humans in general, but they're just not explored, they're not discovered, because what you just said there is not really spoken about in the mainstream. And I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, because there is this pressure when you go to school, when you go to college, that you need to do examinations, you need to do well, you need to get a certain career, and perhaps that is changing. But there is still this pressure to earn a livelihood and do all these things. And it's very difficult sometimes, I feel, to even follow or to know what is your enthusiasm, because you do it out of fear. So in terms of actually making a change within the system, or besides just talking about it, what do you feel is the greatest step that we can take? To me, it seems like it begins with education, because that's when the mind is being shaped.
Well, the French philosopher Montaigne, regarding education, said, it's better to have a head which is well shaped than a head which is well filled up.
Mm.
So well shaped means critical thinking, ability to understand, enthusiasm to discover. Well filled means to be forced to memorize all kinds of useless stuff, for which some of us have zero interest, or for someone who has zero interest in mathematics to learn mathematics. It's cruel. I loved mathematics. I was doing that joyfully, you know. It may seem strange, but it was not my problem. But I could see the other guys, you know, in high school, you know, struggling, and the pressure by the teachers, by the parents behind all of that. I didn't like geography and history. I couldn't care less about Napoleon and whatever, you know, in the past. I've never been interested in this thing. Other people, they love it. We are all different. Some people love music. Some people love sports. Some people love dance. Some people love literature. Some people love drama, acting. I mean, some people love cooking. Some people love gardening. Some people love parenting. Some people love teaching. I mean, we are all different. You know, the problem is that the education system wants to make the children servants of the state or servants of the corporations. You see? And that's the way it works, because the education, who is in charge of it? The state and the corporations. The corporations are in charge of the state, right? Or sometimes the state is in charge of the corporations. You know, that's a difference between, but at the end of the day, the culture in which we live is one of more goods, more services, more. It's not, education is not about the happiness of the children. It's not about trying to find what their vocation is. You know, it's not. It's about, you know, putting them in one of the models. In one of the, it's like you go to a train station and, you know, and there is a train going to Philadelphia, there is a train going to Boston, there is a train going, and all of that is well defined, and you want to, and the counselor in education, he says, oh, this guy, okay, I'm put into Philadelphia, and this one to Cambridge, Massachusetts, right? And so the entire system has to be thought all over again. I taught some college course in mathematics in this country, and it was calculus. I mean, the level of my student was so low. And because they have to do this to become a doctor, to become whatever. But there is zero interest, and the way it is taught in this country is accumulation of knowledge and not critical thinking about, not really what is interesting about mathematics. It's all about calculations and solving equations, applying recipes. You need to know the recipes. You are not asked to understand the depth of the notion, which is the interesting part. And not everybody is ready for that, you know. In fact, mathematics should be reserved to a relatively small part of the children, those are the ones who would be interested, with instructors that would be able to share their enthusiasm for mathematics, physics, or for poetry, or for music. Another catastrophe in our educational system is the arts. You know, that the artistic education is considered to be the useless. And it's very sad. Well, I'm not sure that this one size fits all type of education is really working.
Not so sure either.
But we have to accept what has been made of us, and know that in spite the fact that we have been shaped in a certain way, and I was certainly shaped in my case in a very disciplinary way, both by authoritarian parents and Napoleonian French school system that was very rigid. You know, the idea of Napoleon about education is that in all high schools in France, at the same time, all students would be learning exactly the same thing. Can you imagine the concept of such a monolithic society where everybody would go through the same? But we have a little bit of that in America, right? Yes. Instead of welcoming the, you know, the diversity of body minds, we are like different flowers of different shapes, different colors, and just allowing for each flower the possibility to reach its full potential. But as you hear this, you have to know it's never too late. You are young, and at any age you can change, you can escape, you can find your freedom, you can become this free spirit and try to do what you really want. Because at the end of the day, the prisons in which we find ourselves are self-inflicted. I mean, the suffering in this prison is self-inflicted because we believe the door is closed and it is not closed.
But even to notice that the belief that the door is open takes something. Like it's something that most of us do not realize.
Yeah. Ultimately, we are free to choose. We are free to choose to be a separate entity or not. Because there is no compelling evidence that we are such a separate entity. That it is simply a belief we have acquired, like the belief in Santa Claus. But the door is open for each of us. It's just that we want, most of us, to remain in this jail. Like a bird which has been in a cage for 5 years, and then you open the door and the bird is afraid of the outside. It remains at the threshold.
But do you think that the reason why we believe to be a separate entity is because we haven't been exposed to it? In a sense, we do not know that we are within a prison. But once you see that, there's a way out of this, you'll naturally want to move out.
When you see what?
Like,
remember, the one who sees is this universal I.
right.
And whatever happens is the choice of this universal I at every moment. When this universal I chooses to play this game of being separate, it kind of sends a command throughout the universe, at least for this avatar, for this human being, for the events in the world, and in him or her, to appear consistently in a way which is consistent with the choice being made of separation, of ignorance. Ultimately, it's always a decision of our universal nature to bind ourselves into ignorance or to liberate ourselves. There is no separate entity. There has never been any separate entity in the cosmos.
And to me, the question comes up as this. Now, I'm just going to try to explain because it's not. Essentially, then, we could say, right, do nothing. But I notice in my own direct experience, as I go out throughout my day, day to day, moment to moment, there's still an urge to do something, whether that is to eat an apple, whether that is to go for a walk, whether that is to have a conversation with Francis. There's still an urge to do that. So in a way, it is still happening.
But
it's just that.
What is the problem? Do you think I'm preaching doing nothing?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I just wanted to make it clear. No, not at all.
No. The question is, whatever we do, where does that come from?
Yes, I guess that is the question.
And if it comes from the belief to be a separate entity, it will only perpetuate this belief, somehow because through repetition, if you repeat something a lie enough time, it becomes true.
You begin to believe it, yeah.
So it's like believing in Santa Claus. There has been a moment in our life, because when we were born, we had no concept of Santa Claus, right? Now we are 4 years old or 3 years old, and we believe in Santa Claus. Although we have never met the guy, really. I mean, so at some point, something has happened. There has been a decision in us to carry the burden of an unsubstantiated belief. At least in the case of Santa Claus, there was testimony of our parents who said, yes, I saw Santa Claus. I talked to him, yesterday, and he asked me, what do you want for Christmas? And I told him, things like that. So you trust your parents. So there is a witness account of the existence of Santa Claus. So you have some reason to believe that Santa Claus exists. But if you think about something else, about consciousness being dependent upon the body or the human mind, you have never encountered such an evidence.
No.
As you were born, you didn't have this belief. It means that at some point along the road, you have begun to fall in love with this belief up until it became a quasi-certainty, in spite of the total absence of evidence. Meaning, you wanted it. You wanted it. It was not imposed onto you. You, universal consciousness, beautiful being in your freedom, you wanted to play this game. And then, like children playing out in the cold in the winter, when it gets darker and colder, they feel the need to go back home and eat something and drink something warm. You want to go back home.